it. And hopefully the audio is recording.
Yeah,
Sure. Okay. As long as it has like the same settings as we had earlier.
Okay.
All right. Just go ahead and yeah. All right, Eric.
All right.
What? You gonna start us off?
Yeah, start us off. How's everyone doing tonight? Hi. My name is Eric. Welcome to our web development workshop. We're hoping this is going to be the first of many workshops, but today we're going to be focusing on HTML and web apps. The general audience for this course is, for anyone, but it's going to be a very kind of high-level overview of what HTML is. Me and James here, we're both students at Coder Vox, which is a programming bootcamp, and I'll let John say a little bit more about who we are.
All right, thanks. So, yeah, thank you everyone for coming out on this cold night. I'm John, so I'm the co-founder of Coder Vox. So Coder Vox is a 12-week programming bootcamp. We teach HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and PHP. So James and Eric, they're our students. We're very proud of all the progress they've put in for the last 7.5 weeks. And they're going to demonstrate to you guys what they've learned about coding in HTML. So our main focus is really to find people jobs. So there's a big market for developers out there, software engineers, programmers, if you haven't noticed. But companies have difficulty finding talented people. So that's where we come in. So people come to us because they're looking for an opportunity to switch careers, or they're looking for an opportunity to become software developers, or maybe they want to build their own startups. Maybe they have ideas for the next Facebook, the next Snapchat, whatever it is. We want to empower people through code. So, and I'm going to hand it off to Aaron. So Aaron's our admissions specialist.
Hey everyone. I started coding probably 4 or 5 years ago. I was in sales for a long time, probably about 10 years out of school. And I wish that boot camps and Coder Vox specifically was around when I started, because it would have helped me a lot. I pretty much had to learn from trial error, long nights at the bookstore, and making a lot of mistakes. One particular mistake cost me a year because I studied a technology that kind of died out. So, like he was saying, as far as the job market goes right now, there is a lot of demand for software developers. Anyone that goes on Craigslist can see that. You open any business magazine, everything's tech. Like right now, tech is a part of the economy that there's a lot of investment, there's a lot of capital being dumped into that, which means it's a vibrant part of the economy in general. And then the reason that developers are kind of like rock stars is because there's a barrier to entry. So you have to spend time to learn this stuff, and you have to practice it, and maybe you might have natural, given skills to really get in. And so that's a lot to do with your own creativity and your own mindset. But again, if someone comes into school like this and they, say they're like an auto mechanic, or there's somebody that is already used to dealing with systems and has that kind of mind frame, they can be awesome developers in 3 months. Quick. But that said, there's a lot of work. These guys will tell you. You're getting good value, I guess, for you. So yeah, it's great. All right, cool.
Well, so this is the outline you want to talk about.
Okay. Well, before we get into that, I just wanted to get a feel of where everyone else is coming from. So if we can go around the room real quick and just let us know, your programming background, why you're here, and what you're hoping to get out of the workshop. You can start right here.
Okay. My name is Francisco. I'm a Java developer, and I'm interested in moving the front end. So that's why I want to know more about the HTML5. That's why I'm here.
Cool. My name is Chad. I understanding and practice with HTML, but I work in the broadcast technology industry, and that is definitely where the market is shifting, so I'm just hoping to gain a little more perspective.
Hello, my name is Marla. I have an art degree with a information systems minor, but I've been working in TV for 14 years, and it's low paying and it's kind of frustrating and it's dying off. So I always had an interest in computers, so I'd like to learn developing and go into something more lucrative and more fun. And that's why I'm here. I'm trying to teach myself the things that school didn't really take care of, I guess.
On the right place.
Thanks.
I'm Austin. I work in help desk support kind of role, kind of moving into more of a QA title where I do Selenium and kind of automation stuff. I'm trying to learn more about HTML.
John, I work with Austin, sort of support. We do like SQL support, or SQL Oracle support for giant enterprise application, and it really can be mind-numbing at times. I really would rather build things and make things than support those stuff that other people build. So I came and visited these guys 2 weeks ago to see what Coder Vox is all about. They told me they're going to start doing these things, so I'll be very Austin up here and check it out.
My name is Melissa. My background is in C and C++, but I'm currently learning web development and mobile development through online classes.
Cool.
My name is Leah. I'm a graphic designer. I've got basic HTML, 5, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript under my belt, but it's mostly design.
Name's Dennis. I've got about 17 years of experience in web development, so I'm actually just here for her since she's my wife. But wanted to come out and see what you guys were teaching and everything. So
I'm Derek. I have a background in back-end development, some Ruby, some front-end development, but mainly design. I kind of came here just to kind of check it out and kind of refresh my skills a little bit.
So I'm Roger. I'm a backend developer. I'm also the instructor for this course. And these two of our students, I'm observing them and see what they've learned in the past 7 weeks and exploring what they learned and then expanding it to you guys.
I'm Blake. I'm roommates with this lovely dude over here named Aaron. I see the rock star life he lives, getting to make his own schedule and kind of work when he wants to, but yet still make a lot more money than I do. So definitely interested to come see what this is all about.
Hey guys, my name is Brian, and I'm a mentor for the class, and so I help out the students after hours with issues they come up with and general programming assistance that they need. And I'm also a software engineer dealing mostly with Java backend.
Hi, I'm Joe, former military guy. I did HTML back when the internet first kind of started. You know, and I did it a lot when it was HTML1, and I think now it's up to 5. So I just kind of wanted to see what's changed, and a little bit of programming background, but all of my skills are very, very rusty, and so I just kind of want to see what's changed and what we can do from here on out.
I'm Elvin, business person, just want to learn some more coding stuff.
Cool.
I'm Dharmesh. I have more of middleware experience, whether it be C, C++ or Java. Have some exposure to front-end web development, but didn't work anything other than college projects on those. So I'm interested to learn more about this.
Okay, my name is Abi. I'm a solutions architect responsible for developing softwares to help chip designers. So we actually write softwares that actually simulate stuff and things like that. But my background is pretty much into C and C++, hardcore engineering software. Never done anything on the web technology. That's why I'm here.
Cool. My name is James. I'm a student here, and I guess I'm presenting. But yeah, my I studied economics in school. I graduated, realized I wanted nothing to do with it, so came here. Loving every day.
Greed is good.
Hold on.
My name is Daniel from Wall Street. I have a degree in economics as well. I'm technically, supposedly a DBA in Oracle. I've worked with SQL Server in the past at a customer relations management software developer making mobile apps. Right now I'm diving headlong into Oracle's Java, hardcore, EE, all that good stuff. Yeah, pain in the neck. But very powerful, and there's a lot of jobs.
Oh yeah.
Noted, right?
Yeah,
Nice to meet you.
What else?
Hey, so I'm Daniel Coe. I'm the COO here at Coder Vox. Primarily, I do specialize in all the business development of this coding bootcamp. And main thing that kind of drives, the large influence of coding bootcamps in the U.S. is just like my partners here stated. We get people jobs, very nice jobs, indeed for the job market. I do specialize extensively in recruitment, a lot on the Fortune 500 level. So what I can pretty much tell you is that in the coding bootcamps, what they don't offer compared to the degree is you might pay $200,000, for a 4-year bachelor's degree. The day you graduate, you are set out, on your own, ready to find that job. For an average candidate, to find the job will take anywhere from 6 months to a year. And most likely, you're not going to find a job that pays, the 40 to 60,000 range, which is the normal rate that you do need to have in order to sustain here. In the software developer market, however, the starting salary on average in Austin alone is a minimum at $60K. So a lot of these boot camps around the U.S., we do teach a lot of the simple basics from fixing your resume to getting your online profile out there. And we do work a lot with specific recruiters, a lot of companies, and getting partnerships that they want to come and take our developers. So what we actually offer here is very innovative compared to a lot of the more software boot camps. We want to really offer a very innovative and engaging environment. We kind of treat this more instead of like a school as like an actual workplace. We want our students to come in. We provide a lot of benefits, for our students here. So this is kind of like their second home. So I do really appreciate all of you coming in here today, and take it right back to James and Eric. So.
My name is just real quick, Eric. I'm actually originally a history major, so I think it's really cool that we all come from kind of different backgrounds. Like James is from economics, so we're kind of and we want this workshop to be kind of like a two-way street. We're students as well, so we're always learning as well. So so this is kind of the basic outline of the workshop that we're going to be trying to follow. We're going to kind of go through how web apps or websites work. The syntax of the language of HTML. If you brought your computer, we're going to put together a simple HTML website. And then after that, let's kind of play it by ear. Obviously, a lot of us are from different experience levels, and we can kind of go into topics that you're more interested in.
So we're going to start out just building it from the ground up, basically touching on everything that is HTML, and then we'll see where we get. Hopefully we'll get to the HTML5 like intense stuff towards the end, but we'll see what happens. If at any point you don't understand something, just raise your hand, ask questions. We're gonna try to paste this correctly so everyone's on the same page.
So how web apps work. So when you enter an address into the browser, does anyone know what happens? I mean, it's basically illustrated up there, but basically what's happened behind the curtains is when you put in an address in that text field up there, your browser is sending a request to the server, and that server returns a file to your browser. So that's essentially what's going on behind the curtains. A good way to think about that is imagine that James here is a library and I'm a browser. So I would go to James as a library with a book request. I don't know what's going on when he goes into the stacks of books to grab that book. All I know is I give him the request for the book. He goes into the back of the library, grabs that book, and returns it to me. So that's basically how web apps work.
Another way to think of it is like a restaurant. You go to a restaurant, John browser sits at a table, the server comes up and asks what he wants, and he or she orders, places an order for some food. The waiter or server then takes that information, to the kitchen and the cooks in the back prepare the food, give it to the waiter, and she brings it back out to you. You don't know how that food was made. Whether you want to know how it was made or not, that's up to you. But you don't know what was done to prepare it. You just only know how it's presented. And what that dish consists of, that's the front end. So that's the HTML, CSS, and the JavaScript, which we'll talk about.
So when you're asking the server for a certain type of file, you can get a lot of different types of files. You can get HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And each one of these layers have different roles or different responsibilities. HTML, which we're going to be focusing on today, is kind of the structure or form. CSS is the presentation, and JavaScript is the behavior. Analogy that's often used is like a house. So HTML would be the structure of the house. CSS would be the paint color, the color of the curtains. And JavaScript would be like light switches, or what happens when you turn the thermostat up.
So because browsers natively only understand HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can actually load your website from your desktop. You don't have to have it on a server. So this is just explaining that as we're working and writing our file, you can drag your HTML document and drop it into your browser, and it'll go to your file and display your website. So if you guys want to follow along, we're going to build a recipe. You can pull up a text editor of some sort. If you want to download one called Sublime Text, that's the one we typically use. But you can also just use, I think Mac has a text edit, and you save it as a save the text as a .html when you do it, and you'll just drag it and drop it in there. But that's just explaining what that is. So if you're following along, go ahead and create a folder to hold your project and give it a name. You can call it workshop.html or index.html. A lot of the primary page of any website, 90% of the time, is going to be called index.html or some extension. And so yeah, this is breaking down just the text editors on the right. This is a general workstation of someone coding an HTML website. You have the text editor on the right, which is where you write your code. And if you want to, you just take the file at the file location and drop it in the browser, and it'll pull up your website. Okay.
So before we go any deeper, does anyone know what HTML stands for?
Hypertext markup language.
Yes, hypertext markup language. For those of you who don't know, I'll go ahead and try and break that down a little bit. So hypertext. We all know what text is. It's, words on a page. Usually when you're reading text, it's a very linear process. You're reading it from front to start. When we put that hypertext in front of it, hypertext essentially means the links that allow you to jump from page to page. And the markup language is simply indicating that HTML is a language like any other. It has its own formatting, its own rules, and its own syntax. Here we have HTML elements. HTML elements are essentially the building blocks of HTML. And like I said before, any language has its syntax rules, and elements have their syntax rules as well. And it's usually, most of the time, it'll be an opening tag, as you can see with the tag name, and then a closing tag with that slash and the same tag name. And then the content goes in between those tags. It's kind of like a wrapper that's wrapping the content. There are some elements that don't have a closing tag, like empty elements. We can go into that later. But essentially just understand that, elements are what HTML pages are built out of. So for example, one element would be a paragraph element. As you can see, we have the opening tag P and the closing tag P. And then in between there is the content of what's going to be displayed on the browser, which would be, this is a paragraph. Another thing that elements can have is an attribute. And an attribute essentially tells additional information about that element. And it's always going to be in the starting tag. and it's going to have a name equals value in quotation. You can have as many attributes as you want for an element, and they're all going to be in that starting tag in that exact syntax. Name equals value in quotations. So once you understand these elements being the building blocks, you can kind of understand how an HTML structure is. It's all these nested elements inside of each other, kind of like the Russian dolls. So the very outer HTML element is going to be that first doll, and then inside of that, you're going to have successive HTML elements inside.
So the first element of any HTML document is simply the doc type element. All HTML documents must start with the doc type element. This syntax is exclamation point, doc type in all caps, and then HTML, and that basically says, hey, this document is an HTML document. Next, below that will be your HTML tags, and the HTML tags will encompass everything, all the content of your website. Everything that has to do with it will go between those tags, and you'll finish with the ending HTML tag. It can have a language attribute, and this gives the browser additional information, which can be helpful for things like screen readers or encoding and reading it. It's not necessary. You could write that as just the HTML tag with no language equals English.-US, but we just put it in there to show you.
And just real quick, so that doc type HTML, that's basically telling your browser that you're using HTML5. I'm sure you said that you worked with HTML1 before, and it used to be a lot lengthier than HTML5. So it's real simple. Now it's just the exclamation mark doc type HTML, and that tells your browser that everything within this page is HTML5.
So your next tags are going to be your head tags, and these will come before your main body. So your head tags contain all the metadata and information about your website, such as the title. Now, this title website title does not actually show up in your browser. You don't see it in the content. What you will see that is in the tab at the top or certain other places, but not actually in the website's page. So you can give between the head tags. You'll often put links to other resources like CSS, which we're not going to get into, or other metadata that isn't really important when you're just starting out, but if we get time, we'll talk about them later. So those are the head tags, and the head tags are different than a heading tag, which we'll talk about in a second.
So does anyone have any questions so far about, when you put that text inside of that title element, does everyone know where that appears in the browser? Cool.
One question.
Yeah.
Would we be needing Wi-Fi access for access?
No, you don't. You don't. That's the thing about
I mean, we might need it to grab pictures and stuff. But.
Oh yeah, correct. You might need it to grab pictures.
Unless you have pictures on your computer that you can use.
But the thing about HTML is it's not hosted anywhere. The browser can read the HTML by itself. If you want to, though, the password. We done the password?
It's change the world, all lowercase.
Change the world, all lowercase. However, it's not going to be necessary to get the most of what we're saying. So starting out, we went over the doc type and the head tags, and we're going to go ahead and just write them in so you understand what this should look like. So this text editor will do fancy stuff, like if I hit tab, it'll just create the tags for me. So don't be put off by that. And you guys know what I did wrong already?
Language.
Yes. I forgot the HTML tags.
HTML.
Yeah. And the language, like I said, is not required. So I'm not going to put it in there, but yes, you could do a lang attribute equals, but we'll leave that out for now. And then we went over title. Well, awesome website. So what is this website going to look like, do you guys think?
Blank with just a title.
Where's the title going to be? In the tab, exactly. So you'll see that it says awesome website up here, but there's actually nothing in the actual body, which is where the window is. So going back into it. So go ahead and write this in your text editor if you're following along. Any questions on those tags? Okay. And just follow this. You want to take this one?
Cool. So a good way to think about a website is kind of like a newspaper. So if you take a look at this newspaper, the thing of most importance would probably be the title, Men Walk on Moon. And then you kind of have the subheading that goes a little bit more into what that title is about. And then you have the separate articles, the authors, and then paragraphs underneath. So HTML has these elements that kind of signify the importance of certain things on your page, and they are the heading tags, and you have 6 of them. You have H1 through H6, and they basically tell the browser the level of importance of those elements. So going back to the newspaper, how you might break this up, and it's not, you don't have to do this, but one way that you could break it up is you could see that as the H1 tag, you could see that as the H2, that as the H3, and that as the H4. They're not necessarily intended to be there for styling. They're just there kind of for semantic reasons to tell the browser this is the thing of most importance, this is the thing of secondary importance, and so on and so forth.
So go ahead and add your body tags to your document, and then add some H1, H2, and H3 tags. Now we're going to be building a recipe, or at least something that resembles a recipe. You can build whatever you want. You could build a resume. You could build like a flyer to find your lost pet. But just make sure you practice adding H1, H2, H3 tags however you would for what you're building. So I'm going to add my body tags. What was that? Oh, yeah, you're right.
So what goes in the body tags is what's going to appear on the screen.
H1. What was your recipe for? Do you remember?
Just call H1 a collection of recipes.
Please. Okay.
H2 would be the name of the recipe.
What did you build in the other one? Salad or something? I don't know.
Bacon and egg chili.
Oh yeah, that's right. Breakfast sandwich.
Top ramen. Yeah. H2 top ramen.
Okay. Ramen. And then sorry. It should be H2 because I'm doing H2 for the ramen as well because we're building 2 recipes, and ramen and breakfast sandwich would be of equal importance because they both represent the same idea. H2. We'll just do 2 for now. And so within your tags, we got 2 H2 tags. We can add an H3 tag. So we're building a recipe. What do recipes typically have on them? That's the right question.
Yield servings.
Yeah. So when you read a recipe, what's the first thing you guys see?
Ingredients.
Exactly. Oh. Well, actually, you're actually ahead of us there. So we have ingredients, and what else is after ingredients typically?
Instructions.
Exactly.
Directions.
Yeah. The great thing about text editors is they don't check your spelling. So feel free to criticize if I do misspell something. Okay, so as you can probably see, there's a hierarchy of importance here. You have your title of your website, a collection of recipes. We have two main recipes, breakfast sandwich and ramen. And within those, you have your ingredients, instructions, and under both of them. So we're going to go here and see what it looks like.
Save it.
Yes, thank you. There we go. So as you can see, H1 is the largest, followed by H2, which is our breakfast sandwich and ramen, and then our ingredients and instructions. And by default, HTML will make your H1s bold and a certain size depending on what level they are. Again, you're gonna want to use styling tags to make it look pretty. You'll get to the point where you're going to want to leave most of that, 99% of it, to CSS. And that's not the reason for the H1 tags, is to make them small or large. The reason is to establish that hierarchy so that when you look at this site, you can infer semantically which one is more important. Any questions on heading tags? Cool. Oh, sorry. Okay, we just did that. Okay. You want to take this one?
Okay, so paragraphs are pretty self-explanatory. They're just, as in any text, they're blocks of text. And as you saw before, they are defined by the P element. So let's say, for example, that right here we want a short description of the breakfast sandwich. So we'd have a opening P tag and a closing P tag, and between there you can write whatever you would want about that breakfast sandwich. So, this breakfast sandwich is the best thing ever. And then, you can type a completely different one for the ramen right here.
Makes my day.
There we go. So if we take a look at that page right there, you'll see that paragraph displayed underneath those titles.
I want to save it.
Yes, thank you. That's gonna. And by default, paragraph, of course, is not bolded or anything. One thing that you will know that we'll hint at later is these tags. Style format inside the HTML document doesn't actually matter. So,
Just broke the H1.
yes, I did. Thank you. So format doesn't actually matter. This is here. We save it. We pull it up. It's still the same. So the reason that these are on new lines are actually because they're what's called block elements. So by default, P tags and heading tags will go to a new line. There are some elements, like a hyperlink element, that don't do this. Therefore, you can put a hyperlink element inside a P tag or inside a P tag, and it won't break to the next line, which we'll go into more detail. But I just wanted to point that out now. That this format has nothing to do with how it is displayed here, and it is just up to what these tags are and what their default styling is. Oh yes, and extra spaces will be removed. Save, and it will be the same thing. Extra spaces will be truncated just to one space because that's how it is. Sorry. So as you can see here, going back to our newspaper analogy, we have our H1s, and then our story we used a P tag for. So usually you'll be using P tags to contain the bulk of your content, your descriptions in your text. So go ahead, and if you haven't already, do what we did here and add a short description into your site, just using a p tag. It doesn't have to be a description. You could add a byline by whoever the author is, or you could use a different h1 tag for that, depending on your preference. Go ahead and add it in there.
Okay, so images, the fun part. So to add images, it's essentially the same thing. You're going to use an element, and the element to add images is img. And img is always going to have an attribute called src, which is source. So if you remember, let's put the picture, let's see. Right underneath the description. So we have the element name and the attribute, which is src, equals the value. And what's going to go inside of those quotations is the location of your image. This is what I was talking about earlier as far as an empty element. As you can see, all the other elements up on there have an opening tag and a closing tag. The image is not going to have a closing tag at all. So let's get a picture.
Just do HTTP.
So
imager.
You can, like I said, the src attribute is going to point to location of the image. You can,
We'll get to that in a second.
I don't know. Can we pull up an image real quick?
Just use the one in the presentation.
What's the location of that one?
The HTTP, it's on the left side.
I didn't bring my glasses.
Oh.
Sorry.
That's right. Sorry.
I'll let you take care of
I
that.
left you out to dry there. Oops. I'll just read it. http://imgur/.com/gallery. Thank you.
R
T
Q T
X
X V. Yeah.
Oh. Are we on point? Are we on point there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we'll save that.
Let's test it.
See what happens. Nice.
You forgot the dot image or whatever.
The extension.
The extension of the image.
You mean like like JPEG?
Yeah.
Usually it doesn't require one. Well, actually, I'm not really sure about that. I've always thought about it. I don't think that's correct.
Finder. Are you on the interwebs?
That's a good question. Yes, we are connected to
Is
the
it
interweb.
plugged in?
Okay, source equals HTTP imager. Okay, we'll do this. We're gonna cheat.
Use Placekill.
Do you have to close? No.
You don't, but if I want to edit, I have to grab it. Let's see. This is. Oh, it was right.
The quotes are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think so. I don't know. It could be, and this is actually interesting that we came across this. It could be that this image actually doesn't exist anymore. But yeah. So we can just go to. This is lame. We'll do McDonald's. Got a breakfast sandwich images. And we'll go here, and you can go to copy image URL. And just paste it in there. Oh, God. We're not having that.
Get the actual image.
Yeah, visit.
Go view image.
View image first.
Where? We're talking about here?
Open it.
Hoop Dreams? That's going to be pretty long.
No.
No. I don't know what's going on here.
View image first.
It's not a right click. It's like the actual.
Wait there.
No.
Oh, I'm just doing it again. Okay, let's see. Okay, this is probably going to be still bad, but this actually isn't a big deal. Oh, perfect. Okay, because we're not going to be using. Because, like I said, you run into the risk of whoever's hosting that image. and you guys can see
You can
this.
see it's pixelated too a little bit.
And I'm using these attributes right now, width and height. I usually don't use these, and I think I need to add pixels on there too, because I usually leave all my styling to, there we go, I guess I don't. So these are 500 by 500 pixels by default. I usually leave this to CSS, but I wanted to make it more viewable. And, you know, as a moment of a learning moment, you don't, a lot of, like, I've seen news organizations, like, do hyperlink to someone else's hosted image, and like especially if it's like Fox or someone, like they'll do something weird to the image, and since it's still linked to it, that shows up on Fox's website. Yeah, so it's better to actually save them locally, which we'll discuss on in a second.
And it's actually good that we weren't able to get that image because that leads us to the title attribute of the image. In case you can't get the image.
Are we doing this? Is this what we were saying?
Oh no, like adding the attribute of title and.
Oh yeah, okay, that's actually super cool. Yeah, so you can continue.
So another attribute that you can add is alt, which well, the alt was the rollover one, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead and put alt and title.
We have alt, right? Title's the rollover one, but see. So this is not a valid hyperlink. So this alt text is shown, and you can also do title equals McDonald's. Did I? Okay. See how I'm hovering over it, and it pops up and says McDonald's. And titles are good for because they give a description semantically of what the image actually is, and it'll be important for things like screen readers and people trying to interpret what that image actually is. So for now, we'll leave this be as we continue because we will be doing something else. So if you want to, go ahead and add an image tag into your site if you already haven't already, and find something on the internet, or you can wait and we'll add another image another way. So there's two ways to add images. We'll probably actually.
Can I say something real quick too?
Yeah.
So when you talk about using another image from another server, if you put that on any page, in theory they can see that page load and then they can track what's going on your site, like as far as how many hits you're getting, they can see how many times that image is going, so they can use it for metrics. So a lot of stuff with tracking works in that theory. And with the marketing industry, what they do is use a pixel. It's a 1x1 image. It's invisible on a page, and they put that all over the place, tracking pixel. And that's how they kind of track how stuff's going on. So a lot of times, instead of using cookies, which is a different subject, they use pictures to do tracking. So try to use your own images as much as you can, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So like they already said that.
And going back, the reason
Did you have a question?
Yes. You did say we don't have to be online to actually
Right.
render it in the browser, right?
Right, we're going to show you in a second. Well, if you already have an image on, you have to do this method, you have to be online, of course, because you're sending an HTTP request to whatever this address is, and that's sending you back the image. So to access this image, yeah, you got to be online. However, to add an image, you don't have to. You can host the image locally anywhere on your computer, just as this file itself is hosted on my computer, which we'll go over and explain. But does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. But yeah, so you can host your images locally, and instead of doing an HTTP, you can just link to the relative URL. And relative URLs are basically, so if you have an index.html and a blog.html, and they're in the same folder, you can link to the other just by putting in the name of that file.
And this is true for any kind of file. So if you have a picture in the same folder, all you would have to do is in that src attribute, you just point to that image file in that same folder. But let's say, for example, that you have that image in a different folder. Let's say within that main folder you have another folder. And for this purpose, let's just say that folder is called images.
John.
And
It's called profiles in John.
yeah. No, but whatever that folder is called, and then you have files inside of that second folder. So to link to that, you would have to specify the folder so it knows which folder to look in, and then the file within that folder. So if you're not connected to the internet at all right now, and you have pictures locally, go ahead and put them in the same folder as your HTML file, and try and have that image element source point to that location.
And another way you can do that is if you need to go, this is a little bit more in depth, I guess, but so you can just link to any sibling folder file just with the file name. But if you're inside a parent folder, and this is good to know for just like navigating like command lines and whatnot, you use a ... and what this says is go up one folder and then find this file name. So I could do a ... and do another ... two dots, and go up one more if I wanted to. But here we just go ... go back one, and we go to index, which is right here. Or ... go back one, go to blog, which is right here. But yeah.
Have you guys ever had an experience where instead of the double, you use a single if it's on a local machine?
I've used it before, but that's just how I learned it, so.
I've never done that.
What I'm saying is sometimes I have errors and I have to troubleshoot.
You have to go?
Sometimes on a local, like if I save everything on a local folder.
Oh, you got a question? Okay. Okay. So what we have here is this is how you would do it locally, and I'll just write this out so you can see it. What I have right here is I have a picture of a cat, or I assume it's a cat, and we're in this main folder. So we're in index.html, and I have a picture inside assets, and then inside images. So I just go assets folder, images, and then cat.jpg. And I think this is a cat, but I'm not really sure. There we go. So you get something like that. It's weird that that link wasn't working earlier. So that is images and local relative links. Does anyone have any questions on that?
So what happens to the title? You actually can write a title in the image.
Yeah, so
Where does that title go?
you see how my mouse is hovering over... Did I write a title here?
No.
So I don't have one right now, but if I were to do title...
Gotcha.
Yeah, then I would hover over it, and yeah. And then I would hover over it, and it would appear. More questions?
I may be getting ahead of myself here.
Yeah.
I know this is a relatively elementary presentation. I understand. But if you're pulling information from a database, say for products, with corresponding pictures, how do you set those things?
So what?
As far as pulling the pictures.
So what you do is you query the way I've done it, and this is like a simple way because
bringing up a list.
I learned this like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. I just saved the URL. I saved assets/images/cat.jpg as a string, and I queried that, and then I had that, and I inserted it in there, and then I just had a folder. A folder of images, not a database of images. So I don't know about saving images to a database, but I just saved the relative link to a database and used that.
The other thing you can do for that instance is actually save the file directly into the database as a base64 encoded string. That way you can actually just transfer it as text back to the browser, and it doesn't have to go pull it from your folder. You just drop it into the source, and it drops the base64.
Is that how it's normally done in business?
It depends. Some companies will do that if they're small images. The larger the image, the larger the data that goes into the database. So most companies will do it like what he said and just give a relative link in the database.
Okay. So any other questions on the images URL stuff?
The .jpg file extension, sometimes when you use all caps, that screws you up real bad too. Photoshop has a real bad habit of putting them by default. So just down the road, that might save you a headache a little bit.
It is case sensitive, right?
It is case sensitive.
Yeah. Run into that before.
You want to go for links?
Sure. So links. I'm sure you all know what links are. Your jumps to another page or another section on the same page. And the way the syntax for a link is using the A element, which stands for anchor. So as you can see, this one has an opening tag and a closing tag. And this one also always has a attribute called href. And the value for that is going to be the location of where you want that link to go. And whatever's in between that those A tags is what's going to appear on the browser. So in this example right here, it's going to say click here, and that once you click on that, that's going to take you to that URL in the href value.
So just so you can see us writing it. Well, you can do this inside a p tag. This is a link to HTTP. Remember HTTP. Close tag. Content to Coder Vox in anchor in paragraph.
So far, all these elements that we've been talking about, like James said before, they're block elements, so they're all going to be starting on a new line. This A element that we just introduced is an inline element. So if you look at the bottom, that Coder Vox does not start on a new line. It starts on the same line as the rest of that P tag.
Did you have a question? Oh, cool. Okay. So that is how you do links, and the same thing applies for relative URLs as opposed to HTTP. We actually showed you earlier when we linked from the index to the blog. That's one way websites link within themselves, because they'll have their index file and they'll have their pages saved in the same folder, or at least in the same area, so they can link among themselves. But yeah, any questions on linking? Okay, we're going to do this. How would I make this image link to its source code? I guess we can't do source code because we don't have it.
Page.
So any page. How would I make this image link to codervox.com? href. That actually would not do it because I don't believe the image can take an href. Can it take an href? I've never actually tried that before.
You can, but it's invalid.
Is it? Okay. I've never actually tried that before. No, so you cannot do that. It's similar.
You are saying as an image itself. I thought you will change it to anchor.
Yeah, that's what actually I was saying. So anyone else? Okay. The way I was saying, I don't think I explained it correctly, was you can just wrap these in an A tag, and this won't link anywhere until I add a link. Vox.com, and I don't think that'll work because it's HTTP. And we'll see if this works. So, there we go. The image is now clickable and linkable. And you can do this to everything.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, you can wrap any element with that opening A tag and the closing A tag, and it becomes a link.
So go ahead and add a link to your website if you haven't, just to give you practice with the syntax. href, I believe that's hyperlink reference, is what it stands for. I'm going to say that. But does anyone have any questions on linking? Cool. Okay. You want to take it?
Sure. So the next element we're going to be taking a look at is lists. I mean, lists are pretty important. There's two different types of lists. Well, two main types of lists. You have a ordered list and you have an unordered list. The ordered list is obviously numerical, and the ordered list is unordered, and by default it'll display the black bullet points. The element for a list is the li element. So we'll go ahead and so a perfect place to put a list would be obviously the ingredients.
We do unordered for that.
I mean, not the element for a list. The unordered list is UL, and the ordered list is OL. So for instructions, we would probably want an ordered list because it's numerical and it tells the user what steps we want them to follow. Each item in that ordered list is going to be in a li element.
So, ordered lists, like anything else, have default CSS styling. So that's all this 1, 2, and 3 is. You could style this with a different attribute. I guess I could go and do this. Lists have a type attribute, and by default it's type 1, but you could do type A, I'm going to say. There we go. And it goes A, B, C. And then there's like Roman numerals, but that's the type attribute for lists. So that's all that numbering is. Really, it's important just to understand that in ordered lists, the order matters semantically, because that'll be important, because you're laying your structure, your foundation. You're saying that the order matters here, and that's where it's really crucial to differentiate between the unordered list and the ordered list. And the unordered list by default has the bullet points. Let me go over here. You could also style it with a type attribute. I don't know if you can style with a type attribute in HTML, but you can style it in CSS to be like squares or just none. But we won't worry about that now. So that's what it could look like. So go ahead and mimic what we've done now if you're following along with the recipe or with whatever you're building. Add the unordered list and ordered list. So
those could be populated dynamically using JavaScript as well.
Yeah.
Tied into a database or not tied
into And I guess with an ordered list and unordered list, if you've ever seen a menu bar at the top, all that is an ordered list or an unordered list with stylized to be inline as opposed to a block element. So you remember how we talked about block elements go to a new line, but inline elements stay up top? That's all it is. It takes each li, makes it inline, so it stacks it horizontally or orders it horizontally. But that's what a menu is. It's just an ordered list with styling.
A menu is essentially a list of links, if you think about it. So if you have them display right next to each other, you have a navigation bar, and the list element is really commonly used for navigation bars.
Okay. So structure, a lot of times you want to combine your elements together, especially if they're related. So here we have this image, we have this title, we have this description, and all of this. This is all semantically related to the breakfast sandwich. Just as, I guess, here you have text and you have a title here, this is related. Oops. Getting ahead of myself. I don't know what happened. Sorry. And how, I guess, this main title, this H1, is described later by this H2. So these are related, so these could be a section. And it's good to combine your elements into sections because then you can stylize them together. You can move them around together. And then semantically, again, people know that, hey, this is all one thing, or this is all relating to the same thing. And the way you do that is through an element called a div. And here you can see that this is theoretically what you could have. You could have a div just for your header. You could have a div for your navigation. You could have a div for your sidebar, your section, lender, I don't know what that is, sector, I don't know. And then you could have a div for your footer. And that's all. That's just stylized. So like these divs are styled in layout so that they can move around. And the ID we'll talk about later, but it's an attribute that you use to describe an element that you want to refer to later on. That is very important, but we'll talk about it at the end.
So looking at this page, how would you logically divide this up? Probably by recipe, right? So we could put a div right here. And a div right there. And this kind of tells the page that this breakfast sandwich is one section. And then we can wrap the ramen one in a whole other div. So if we pull this up on the browser right now with that div, what would show?
What
would change? Visually, would anything change?
Visually, would anything change?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Because one, we're not stylizing the divs, but two, divs themselves don't have any default style. They're just there to organize and combine and create the frame. So
The best way to think about divs, or the way that I kind of understood them when I was learning, is they're kind of like invisible containers. You can put whatever you want inside of divs, but until you apply any style to them, they're simply just containers holding the content that you want.
So go ahead and wrap your ingredients and heading. Well, just wrap if you're doing a multi-recipe page, wrap the recipes together, or you can wrap them, maybe your headings together, and then your instructions, which have a list and a heading. You could wrap those together. But go and just practice and add it so that you know it, I guess. Okay, so another fun HTML element is. Oh, sorry, yeah.
And so I noticed you don't say anything about the div. You don't say like div 1 or div.
We not put IDs.
I was wondering, is it if you have more than one div, you have to say what they are, or you can.
You don't.
Okay.
What I could do is if I had a div like these two divs, and these were the only divs I had over on each recipe, I could go into my CSS and be like, all divs add this styling, and it would add styling to both of them. So because I'm applying it to all divs, there's no need to differentiate. But if I had divs around a recipe, each recipe, and then a div around my heading, I would have styling that would apply to my recipes, but not my heading. So therefore, I would want to distinguish and say, div ID equals heading, and then stylize that independently. But they don't have to have an ID.
Can I just add to that?
Mm-hmm.
Typically I use IDs on my divs just to differentiate, not so much for the styling rules, which I do a lot by that, but I also use them to just kind of structure my HTML a lot better, because especially when you start dividing divs up to other divs, I mean, it's hard to lose, it's very easy to lose track of which divs do what, so putting IDs on them is more, before you start styling them, is more semantic than anything else. So.
Mm-hmm. It'll pay off, and I love it when I get code and the nav bar is already nicely contained within however many divs it has, and it's explicit that this is the nav bar section. It's just a lot cleaner and a lot nicer. Any other questions on divs?
Like nested divs, like what you're talking about, are considered bad practice. Like the less nested divs you have, the better your code is. It's primarily like the idea I get with talking about different developers and stuff.
I nest divs a lot. So.
Yeah.
Everybody does.
Yeah.
It's around it more than
Yeah.
nesting.
I mean,
It goes deeper.
To give you a crazy example, I looked at Google search results once, and just to get down to the first search result, the nested 15 divs. So you can't get around it.
And that's Google. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are divs. Any other questions? And moving on to tables. Tables are consist of multiple elements. You can think of like the table as this table element, strictly table, as sort of like a special div. It says, hey, everything in between the table elements are going to consist of a table. And as you can guess, a table will simply create a column row structure. And this is how you, okay. And the way you create a table, as you can see, you have the table tags, which they're not on here, but imagine that they're at the top and bottom. And then you have a TR, which is table row. So you're saying everything within this TR is the first row. So you create tables by rows, one row at a time. Every TR section is one row, one row, one row. And then this first one, this name, hair color, and then awesome, question mark. Oh, there should be a question mark. Those are your headings. So you have name, hair, and awesome at the top. And stylistically, by default, they should be in bold because they're headings, table headings. But it also helps indicate the TH that, hey, these are important. This is not data. This is actually a heading. And then you go on to your next row, and you kind of align them. You say you have your data points. So you have name, under the first one is Eric, and then hair color is black, and then awesome is yes. And then you do the same for James with James, Brown, and yes. Does this make sense, or did I lose you? I know it's maybe. Do you have that
table?
Nutrition table. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. But we can go ahead and create a quick table right here. So what's important that we all ignore in a recipe is nutrition facts. And so what's the first element that I should put here? No, yeah, sorry. And then what's the next one? TR for table row. So we're creating the first row. And then since it's the first row, presumably these are going to be headings. So we're going to use table heading. And who has a...
Calories.
No, we got...
You have to have the heading first.
It's like...
I'm trying to remember.
It's like nutrition. It's like info. Like it's... Because it'll be
Serving
like...
size.
Serving size? Okay. Okay.
It's on the side of your bottle of water right there.
Yeah, the thing is like, oh, it doesn't have anything. All right, so you have serving size, and then you have amount. What?
Amount per serving.
Amount per serving. There we go.
The can.
And then lastly, we have well, the thing is, like, if you do like fat and protein, those don't have calories in it. So percent of daily servings of daily diet.
I don't think that'd be serving size either.
Yeah, it's not the best nutritional table, but okay, I probably just wasted my time doing that. So instead of table headings, we're going to do table row, and our first serving size. Actually, we're going to change this to like ingredient. And we're going to make the first one fat. Oh, that messes up pretty bad. So the serving size for, what is this? Is this ramen? I think this is ramen.
This is ramen.
Oh. Actually, we'll do this. This will be easy. Food. And so our first one is ramen. Well, I guess it's actually a breakfast sandwich. And there are, how many amount per serving? We'll do calories. Okay, so that has, guess how many calories on a breakfast sandwich?
600,
Some-
900.
Oh, no.
Depends
You
on
guys
if
are
you
pessimistic.
not.
I think it's 450, but don't quote me on that. And then percent of daily diet. That's like 25%. Okay, and then
That's
we'll
pessimistic.
okay, and then ramen, and we have how many calories? It's like what 1 to 2.
750.
What ramen?
Yeah. Well, depending on which ones you get, they're high in sodium. So.
Okay, we'll go with 500.
And not to mention the noodles are deep fried.
And this is also 25%. Okay, we'll make it 30% just so you can see the difference. And then we'll make this 700, so it's consistent.
More realistic.
Yeah, okay. So right here you have a whole bunch of bad code. What the hell?
Table rows.
Oh yeah, you want to change that to TD.
Yeah.
Oh, crap, thank you.
He's testing it.
Yes, he passed. Oh.
Highlight it and then hit Command G a bunch of times.
Oh, this is fun.
Or you can do Command D for in Sublime, and it'll change everything, all the GRs.
I refuse.
He's gonna do it the hard way.
There we go. Did I get that? Yeah. Oh, look, this is not very pretty, but you get the general idea. You have these table heads. They're defaultly stylized to be bold, and then you have your first data point, breakfast sandwich, your second data point of the second row, 450, your third data point of the second row, 25%, and the same for the ramen. We're not going to go into detail about this, but of course, there are ways to make it so, like, a column, you can span 2 columns, or you can span 2 cells with attributes, and you can stylize it with CSS, make it look prettier, but at a basic level, this is what a table is. Yeah.
And perhaps someone else can speak to it. I know like they used to use tables to kind of structure like HTML, but generally that's considered bad practice now, right?
HTML5 made it bad practice.
Yeah.
But still a lot of people beholden to that standard. I don't know why. So yeah, I don't personally use tables, and I also think it's bad practice, but a lot of people don't. So
the reason they're bad practice now is they're not semantic. If you're looking at the HTML, a table actually structures it on the web page, where looking at that HTML doesn't necessarily tell you that, unless you know how the tables work.
Okay. So go ahead and add something similar to this, or a similar table on there, or just take a note that says table, and we'll keep going. But we'll come back to this if we get time. We'll come back to a lot of things if we get time. You want to take us away on forms?
Sure, forms. So forms is like the table element. They're going to be an opening form tag and a closing form tag that encompasses the entire form. One of the most common form elements is just going to be a text field, and that's going to be the element input, and the attribute is going to be type, and the value is text. So if you want to go ahead and enter that, and this is an empty element as well, so you don't need a closing tag for the input.
It's important, but yeah, it doesn't have any styling within itself. Let's see if I can get this right. Oh, no.
So, to speak to that about the not having the closing tag, since you're using HTML5, it's semantically incorrect not to have a backslash and end tags like that.
Generally, when you have an empty element, you do want to have that backslash indicate that it's
like image, you would want a backslash right here.
Correct.
And for like a line break, which we haven't gone over, you'd want a backslash right here. And one of the reasons you want to do that is because of I usually do it just because you can also like make your page into an XHTML page, which is just a strict. It just think about it as a strict HTML, and you can't get away with many of the things in HTML that you can in HTML. But yeah, that's just good practice to keep backslashes at the end.
Yeah, if you ever run through a validator without those, it'll complain about
Yeah.
all of them.
You mean to say forward slash?
Is this a forward slash? I actually have no idea the difference between the two. To be honest, because I never. Well, no. But is that a forward slash?
It is.
Okay.
Set backslash.
You learn something every day.
Speaking to what he said, the validator, there is this thing, it's W3, and you can take your HTML code and you can paste it in there, and it'll let you know if your HTML5 is
We'll worry about that later.
correct.
So, continuing with the forms, did we go over this yet?
Oh, yeah.
We did go over this?
Yeah. So go ahead and we'll create input type text within those form tags. And as you can see, you can just type in the name of the text field.
Yeah. So make sure that text has quotations around it, of course. And then we have password. And yes.
And the password actually can have a unique type called password.
Yeah. So as you can see here, my password is password because I don't know what I'm doing. I type in password and it just says password there. With HTML5 and again, like all this stuff, if we have time to, like I'm more than happy to go over some of this stuff at the end. HTML5 adds these new types, which are password and email. So I don't know if it'll tell me, but it should. If I were to try to submit this, I believe, it would say, hey, this is not an email. Or maybe if I put a record in there. Yeah, if I had a submit button. But also you can see, like, more importantly, you can't see the password anymore because it's typed password. But for now, we're just going to assume everything's a text because we are not good people.
Password's been around a lot longer.
Yeah. Okay. No, HTML5. I know email's new. I don't know, but I believe email's new.
But usually you want to assign like a data name to the input.
Yeah, we didn't want to go over like posting and getting.
Okay.
But and again, we have a more in-depth analysis of this if we get to it. But you typically want to assign a name, like you could say user email. Because when you submit the form, and I guess the way you submit a form to the back end is just with an import type submit, and this type submit automatically generates a button for you. And of course, it doesn't go anywhere because we're on the front end. But when you do that, it will have a name value pair of username, email as the name, and whatever you type in will be the value. And you do the same with password, and that's actually how you grab it. So it's important on the back end. You can get by without it on the front end, but like, it's good to know.
That actually did go somewhere, so it went to itself.
Yeah. So just getting into what action would be like, process dot, whatever the file that processes the form is.
So if you want to pull up developer tools, you can kind of see that it goes to itself.
Okay, this is actually we're on we're local, so I don't know if it'll let us do dev tools. Oh, there we go. Cool. And I can't really see this, but this is Google Dev Tools. If you use Firefox, there's an extension called Firebug that could give you similar features. But you can see everything that's on the page right now. You can like click on an element and it'll highlight it for you. It's like, oh, that's an input right there. And you could, I'm not going to spend too long if I can't find it, find your submission here.
It's going to be a network.
That's what I thought. I can't really see though. Is this network? Yeah.
And then hit submit.
Yeah. Okay.
Are you guys going to use this a lot when you tie in your form just to tap out of your JavaScript?
Yeah.
So you can use this.
There we go.
So good thing. Go ahead and click on that. so you can see exactly what he posted in there, and it's by that name attribute that he assigned. So as you can see right down there, the name attribute of that text field was username, and then whatever he entered there.
Can you blow it up?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
So
Is that going to work in the dev tools? It might.
Command plus.
Okay. I don't know where the password is right now. You could probably.
You didn't save your file when you refreshed.
Oh.
You put in a C in the form, so.
There we go. Okay. Okay.
Blow that up again.
Yeah. We'll submit it again. Okay. Are we still in network form? There we go. So that's why the names are important. But with DevTools, you asked about using DevTools on the front end. When we were working with just JavaScript, we were on DevTools all the time. Because, if you have an error, I mean, there are probably better ways to do it, but like, you have a console right here, it spits you back your errors, you're going to be on DevTools, permanently. But it's great, and like, I recommend, like, even like if this is like all the experience in HTML you get, just messing around with DevTools and looking at what a site uses can be very beneficial and also a lot of fun. Just
And the really cool thing about DevTools is you can actually dynamically like change CSS within DevTools to kind of get an idea of what it'll look like. Another thing, if you go back to network, you'll see that the password actually just displayed what he typed in there, which shows that whatever you type in there, even though like that input type shows it as dots, it's purely cosmetic. People can still access, whatever password you typed in there. So that's more back-end stuff to protect passwords. But
hashing. Any questions on this type of form? We're gonna go through other forms, so don't worry about not. All right, so a radio. Okay. You want to explain what a radio tag is?
Sure. So this is just another input type. Remember, we had input type text, we had input type password, and we have input type radio. And radios are for when you want them to only be able to select one option. So in this example right here, they can select Android, iPhone, or Windows. And again, you have that name attribute, and that's how you're going to grab the value of whatever they've put in that form. But for right now, just know that the input type radio is going to give you that radio input, so we can take a look at how that's going to appear.
And so with radio, if I did this right, and I didn't do it right, you can only answer one question at a time. So what I just did was, there we go. So I gave these the same name, so they refer to the same key, and the value is whatever. It doesn't really have a value right now. I'd have to assign it a value for it to. I mean, this is sort of not really what we're going to focus on, but now when I were to look in where we looked earlier, if it were checked, it would have this value of whatever it is.
You change the password value. Not the
Okay, thank you. No. This would be yes, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Default yes.
You could yes just means like that's the value. So when it's submitted, the name will be question, and if this is checked, I believe it checks. It checks to see which one's checked. You could do this, but yeah. So it just starts off checked. You can change it. That's just changing the status of it. Yeah.
You can also not even use the equal sign for check, just the attribute name.
Oh yeah, that's cool. So, but yeah, and it still is there. So that's a radio. Any question on radio values? And this is like primarily used for when you can only have one option, when you can only answer once. But if you want to answer more than once, give more than one input, there are a couple options, but one is select, which we're going to talk about.
Is a drop-down menu. So that's going to be the element of select, and then each option will be the option element, and then you can assign each option a value. And then in between those option tags are what's going to appear in the drop-down menu.
And although we have the value here, this value doesn't actually show up on the screen. We'll load it without it there. I don't think it'll even allow us though. So there's three options, but there's nothing there. So we got to actually give it a value, and I think you can do this.
It's inside the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put it between the tags.
Oh yeah, of course. iPhone and Windows. And what's cool about HTML5, just for those of you who are interested in it, I know there's one called, I think, a data list, where you can, it's something very similar to this, but you can select multiple ones and like type into it, and it'll give you your options. I guess I'll talk about that at the end if you're interested. But here's the drop-down menu, and you can choose one, and that'll submit that value to the form. Any questions on the drop-down menu? Cool. And then we sort of already went over a submit button. The submit button is special because it submits to the back end. You could also, instead of just having the submit button, okay, you could also, we don't have it here, but just do a button, which is a tag in its own. There's a button tag. And the value could be, inside the brackets, could be submit. And this won't automatically submit a, form, but if all you're doing is using JavaScript, you could assign a function to occur when that's clicked. But that's the button. And then, copy this. No, can't copy it. And then finally, this isn't an input, but it's an actual tag, text area. You want to talk about text area? And I guess we're introducing this placeholder attribute, which I believe is new in HTML5. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. So the placeholder attribute, although it's kind of like a ghost text, it looks like it's there, but when you click it, it disappears. So you can input so whatever you want to put. So see, when I start typing, it goes away. It's just something cool that looks nice, that you can give them information about what's supposed to go into that text box. And you can, of course, use CSS to stylize this, make it bigger. I'll try to... Oops. Okay.
And you can use that placeholder on the text as well, obviously, as you can see right here.
Okay. So if you want to go ahead and you can add a do you want us to email you on the recipe, or you can add a did you enjoy this recipe, yes or no, to your recipe page. And then this is one of the last things we'll go over just in the main. I guess we'll still have some time left towards the end, and maybe to hit on some HTML5 stuff, but classes and IDs.
So, like that, someone was asking about earlier, how do you distinguish divs from one another, or elements in general from one another? And one way to do that, the way to do that is with IDs and classes. So IDs point to an element that you want to distinguish from everything else. It's one element can only, an ID points towards one element, whereas multiple elements can have the same class and thus the same styling. So basically the ID and the class will later allow JavaScript and CSS to target specific elements that you want. So right now you can see that this paragraph has an attribute of ID, and this paragraph has an attribute of class. And then what you're seeing on the right side is basically CSS. So in this CSS right here, it's saying that we're going to target this class, make large, and then this CSS is saying we're targeting this this ID, which is special. So as you can see, both of these have the class make large because different elements can have the same class, but the ID can only belong to one element. Does that make sense?
Okay. And then, yeah.
IDs can't do this, but classes can. You can add multiple classes in the attribute tag.
Yeah. So we can go ahead and add some classes to these. So for, that's not fun. We'll go back to here. Is there a submit here somewhere? Is that it? Did I get it? 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Did I? Okay. There we go. Okay, so for like these list I's, LIs, what we could do is, let's say we wanted to stylize this list, but we didn't want to stylize this list. So the idea of just saying apply something to every single LI is not possible because it'll apply everything we do to this list. If we just say apply LI, this to LI, and the way like the way you see like we have like our class here, and this describes this class. This is CSS in a separate file, by the way. You can just add an element there, and it'll describe every single one of those elements. But we can't do that here, so we want to go in and we want to add class equals what was this one? Sandwich, like breakfast. So now I could just stylize these by referencing breakfast and not have to worry about messing with these down there. And let's say I wanted to do like, I could add another one like, there, yeah, eggs there, I don't know, protein. And protein, and then mystery, you know. Okay. And then this would apply, like I could apply just to these two classes instead of that one, if I wanted to do that. But that's how classes work. It's important, like once you're using JavaScript and CSS, like CSS, that's basically how you mock up something, is giving it classes and IDs. But we won't go too much into that. Does anyone have any questions on IDs and classes? Okay. So that takes care of the basics of what we've gone over. What we could do is take questions, or we could go over more things that we missed in detail. Does anyone have like any questions right now, or do you guys want to continue on with some more detailed stuff? So I'm gonna open this up. Detailed? I heard.
Let's go into some of the new features.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Let's. We don't need to go over some of this.
So,
Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Earlier, you had mentioned that you can't put extra spaces in the HTML because it strips it out. How would you go about actually forcing it to put the extra spaces in there?
So you would do. There's a special code, I believe. I don't know it off the top of my head, but it would look like ampersand % 20s : and that's like code for a space. So you just put a whole bunch of those in there, and that will insert a space in there. There's also another one. That's how do you?
I'm just curious. Is there a technology called SAS?
Yeah.
CSS? No.
There we go.
Those are CSS processors.
Yeah.
Not software as a service. No, the ones for CSS.
Non-breaking space is what you want.
Is there a way to
ampersand NVS
make CSS more
or this.
easier to?
I wouldn't say easier. It's just a different way of. It's evolving. There's a newer way to do it.
Or
I'll just leave it at that.
A lot of frameworks incorporate it, and you don't even know it. So that's what's nice about frameworks.
I cut my teeth on with CSS on
Okay.
treehouse.com, and I typed everything in. I followed all the rules, but I couldn't reproduce it and explain it to anybody else.
Yeah, CSS can it can stump you for a while, just alignment, but
The React is it called reaction programming? Where you start
responsive.
Responsive. You start from the small, phone, whatever, and you get bigger and bigger, and things disappear and transform, menu items, things like that.
And so what he's talking about is
It's very cool.
CodyDharma.com, I think this is.
Imperative. Everybody has to have it now.
Yeah.
Nope. CodyDharma.com. What he's talking about is when you're browsing on mobile, things get. This is actually something I designed like the second or third week, so hopefully this works. Otherwise, I'll be embarrassing. So we have this nav bar up there, and inside the CSS, there's like when it gets to breakpoint, collapse it, and that works. Thank God that was. And if my JavaScript's working, I can do that. Okay.
That looks good.
I actually haven't looked at this in a while, so. So you see, like at that breakpoint, like it'll be like go from inline to block. That's not exactly what it is, but you get the general idea. And this is much easier to read on an iPhone. This sort of layout. And this is made with Twitter Bootstrap. If you do get into CSS, I highly recommend looking into it because it's a lot of fun. Bootstrap, yeah, it's pretty popular. Oh yeah,
That makes it a lot easier. It's basically like CSS HTML framework.
Yeah. So though, like with classes with Bootstrap comes with custom classes basically. So like the nav bar, that div, I gave I didn't give it anything, but then when it broke that line, I gave it a new class which was collapsed. And what that does, that just takes away the display. Frameworks can help you out a lot. I recommend learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript raw and knowing it well before going into a framework, but it's up to you.
It works on like the idea of like a 12-column grid, if anyone is familiar with that. So for example, like if you look at a website, one thing will occupy the entire length of the page, and that'll occupy 12 columns. And then the next section or next row, you can have that one section occupies 3 columns, and the other section occupies 9, and so on, as long as both kind of equal 12. That way it kind of grids everything out for you. So.
And you can take divide it into 3 and then divide that one into then that's like its own 12 set. So then you can divide that one into 3 and it's pretty cool.
So is the 12-column grid synonymous with 960 grid?
He's actually used 960
Yeah,
before.
960. I know 960 is hard set to like 960 pixels.
Oh, that's what it is.
I believe. Bootstrap uses the same idea of the 12 column grid, but I don't think it's
they're different.
It's set to 960 pixels.
So if you guys were asking about HTML5, there's a lot of new tags. A lot of these come with default styling, but remember again, the importance is the semantic markup. So what you'll see a lot is you have this strong tag, and that will make whatever is in between your tags bold. But the point of the strong tag is not necessarily to make it bold, because you can do that in CSS anyways. The point of the strong tag is to add emphasis. So if you come across a screen reader that's reading it out, it'll know to add emphasis onto that. Or just looking at the website as a coder, you'll know, hey, this part is important. Whether I want to add bold to it or not, that's my option, but it's important is what matters. And then we have cite, which I believe will make it italics, but it's just saying that this person is being cited. Besides looking directly at the code, it won't have much effect, but it's good for being really specific. Mark will add highlighting, and marks it. The code tag, anything in between it, will give it a monospace font, like that text editors have. The definition says, hey, this is a term. Sample, similar to code, it gives like a sample output styling by default. But again, it's semantically is why they're important because it's saying, hey, this is what this is. This is describing this.
So one question I always like trying to ask myself when I'm designing is, would the meaning change, like if I remove those tags? And I mean, like you said, it's more for semantics. So if the meaning doesn't change at all when you're removing those tags, it's probably something best left for CSS.
And here are some more tags. You can do block quotes, addresses, abbreviations, superscript, which is nice, and subscript, which is nice if you're doing science and math. And then you have these like italics and bold, which really I would never use those personally. I would just leave it to CSS because it's good practice. You always want to keep your frame, your presentation, and your functions separate as much as you can. Leave it to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And don't use the quotation marks because I don't think all browsers recognize it, and you'll just have text with no quotes. Empty elements, you saw me use the BR earlier. That just stands for line break. So as you can see, this paragraph will be on one line. It'll break to the next line and continue. So this is 2 lines on the actual window. And then HR will just add us like a horizontal line.
Did you say you don't recommend using things like italics?
Not the I tag and not the B tag, because all that's doing is saying make this bold, make this italicized. Whereas with the EM tag, the emphasis tag, that makes it italics and it says, hey, this is important, let's put emphasis on that. So when you have a screen reader, though I mean I don't know how technical screen readers can be because I've never really used one, it will add emphasis onto that word as it's reading it. And then with and the same thing with the strong tag, whereas the bold and the italics tags don't carry that sort of meaning.
Aren't the B and I tags being depreciated though?
Yeah. I don't know if I've never used them before, but I know they're one discouraged and two might not work.
Because you've never used them.
I keep my hands clean. Okay?
It's so hard to not use them after you're using them. I would agree. Yeah.
Well, my introduction to HTML was through MySpace. I just remember back then it was all just like G tags.
That's how you get started.
Yeah, right. MySpace.
So would you then style individual EM tags for how you wanted to format inline?
What you could
individual word I wanted this to be read.
What you could do is add you could add EM tags that'll make it italicized for you, or you could add span tags. And a span tag doesn't do anything by itself, but you could say span ID equals special word. And then you could stylize that special word. Anything within those span tags will be stylized that way. So span tags are really popular.
Span tags are, and correct me if I'm wrong, I kind of think of them as like smaller divs.
Like inline divs.
Yeah.
And in job interviews, they ask that a lot. Like, what's a span tag? It's not me.
And new in HTML5. Instead of just having like a paragraph describing the picture, you have a fig caption, and it'll give like a title for it next to it. And what that does is it says, hey, this caption refers to this image. Of course, you can get that effect with other tags, but it's semantically important for reasons. And then you encapsulate the image and fig caption tag within a figure tag, kind of like you do with a table or a form.
So I have another question. I've read some of the stuff about why you should use all this extra formatting stuff, the semantic stuff for HTML5, and a lot of it comes back to screen readers again. Okay, there's a particular that's like one niche thing, screen readers, but like what other is it that like spiders crawling the site are going to pick up the data better, or what's the function?
I think they're preparing for that, but Roger, could you answer that better?
What was your question?
The importance of this semantic markup for anything, I guess, besides screen reading. It's
SEOs, like search engine optimization, will probably use the semantics of HTML5.
If you have like a page and you have like definition and citation, I could write a code that just takes everything, grabs the term, grabs the definition, and puts them together. So if you have I could like if I could write like let's say you had a paragraph in span. That's not a good example. I could let's say you were just writing a scientific paper or anything that the average person wouldn't understand. You have a definition for in the correct tags. I could write a program that literally just adds at the very beginning all the terms that you're gonna need to know before reading this or something like that. But yeah, there are reasons. And then as a developer, when you see the code, it tells you without you having to commenting on it. But yeah, I mean, I think about that a lot too. I'm like, how important is semantics? But it can be important.
So a really good example would be like, I mean, we'll get to it later, but HTML5 now has these new semantic tags like header, footer, section, and when you're reading through this code, it's a lot more easier to see, this element of header and footer rather than going through and seeing like div like ID equals header, or div ID equals footer.
That's good.
And this is just describing the block inline elements. You can stylize, you can change them, but these are how these particular tags are this style, this display by default. So yeah, that's why A doesn't go to a new line. Yeah, and this is like how we showed you to do it. You'll see with our semantic markup, HTML5 has a new way they would advise doing this with new tags. They're pretty self-explanatory and easy to grab because the new tags are basically header, nav, and article, but you'll see that in a second. Just commenting on how we add CSS to a HTML document. As you start writing HTML sites, you might see someone use a style attribute, or they might tell you to use a style attribute in the beginning. This is okay, but the style attribute itself, that's HTML. Even though it's using CSS to mark it up, it's still HTML. So you can add a style attribute and describe it in there, but it's really good to separate that out. So while you can do inline, which is using a style attribute, you can also do this, which is better, which is in the header you have two style tags, and you write your CSS there. And this will look a lot more similar to what your CSS file will look like. And two, it separates it out. So you can, if you run into anything here, you can be like, I can just check back up here what is being described, what is being changed.
And just so you know, it should be closed right there.
What did I mess up? Oh yeah.
Well, then you can take that code later and put it out to another CSS file.
Yeah. So
the best way would be to break that CSS file out completely externally and then just reference it. So right here you have a link element that tells the page that it's a style sheet, that it's a CSS, and it's pointing to that file. Does anyone know why it would be like good to put the CSS file externally?
Page load.
Page load is one
goes
reason.
faster.
Another reason.
It's a uniform thing. Reusability.
There we go.
Reusability,
You
exactly.
can have
So
multiple
you have,
files pointing to the same
Sometimes
CSS.
I go to get answers right. I can't stand it.
So yeah, you can
I
have
can't do anything.
multiple pages all pointing to the same CSS file.
I'm not
And then it's a lot clearer also just to know to go find them. You might hate. I hated separating files out in the beginning because I was like so lazy. But now when you get to like super long, like 300, 400 lines of code or like thousands of lines of code, you'll miss the days when everything was all separated out.
I'm still a little lazy. Like when I want to see how something looks really quick, I'll type it in line or like throw it in the text.
We're
Anyway, it's best practice to keep it separate.
I kind of do the same thing. I usually write them in line first just to see how they look and then break them out into their own files.
That is. You can add a label. So whereas before we had the input thing and we just kind of wrote the orphan username without any tags, you can have a label tag. Semantically, it helps because you know that this label is referring to this input. Or you can just leave it out to the side, but you feel a lot more comfortable doing it this way because you know this is going to go right next to it, or at least close. We went over names. We did not go over checkboxes, did we? You want to talk about checkboxes?
Well, checkboxes are yet another input type, except this one will let you select multiple input types. Multiple values. So the reason that we have these brackets right here is because you can select multiple values. So when you grab that name toppings, it's going to select everything that you checked off, and it's going to put it in an array.
And yeah, so you see the array. The reason you want the box there is because if you don't have the box there, the last value clicked will automatically be assigned to this name, just toppings. Even though multiple ones are clicked, with the box there, it's an array, so each one gets added into the array and stays in that array. But that's more programming.
That's more of a PHP thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not necessary. Submit button, form select. We've gone over. This is a file input. It's not super important right now. I'm going to go over that. This is what a field set and legend looks like. I personally don't use them that often because I like to do my own styling, but you can use a field set and a legend. Whereas as you can see, the field set does the default styling line around the form, and the legend is up top. Okay, there we go. So now we're getting into the HTML5 stuff. A lot of this stuff will just tell you more what you can do and not really necessarily explain it, because like a lot of programming is knowing what to Google, and that's half the battle. But these are, you want to talk about these, Eric?
Yeah, so as we talked about earlier, these are some new descriptive markups that HTML5 has introduced. So header and footer are and nav are pretty self-explanatory. Section is basically like a logical group of information or content. An article would be, I'm actually not too clear on what article
It's like content.
Yeah.
It's content, basically.
And then an aside would be like a small quote or something that you kind of want to section off.
And is the aside by default, is it stylized out to the side? Okay. All right.
But this is useful in screen readers as well, because now screen readers, if you want to jump to the nav section, you'll know exactly where to go.
Yeah. As you start writing more like actual websites, you'll use the header and footer and nav almost immediately, and it's basically the divs.
Again, for better accessibility and screen readers, you can now have the role attribute, and that just tells screen readers what the role of that div is on that page.
So this is just a markup of it. Okay, this is actually important. Not that everything else isn't important. But if you walk away with HTML5, what's new? Although there's a lot of cool things that are new that are actually pretty complicated, this is the big one. And it's the video and the audio tags, more so the video tags. I know you guys have probably all seen Flash Video. You need a plugin to run it. Most mobile phone browsers, I don't know if they do now, but they used to not run it. HTML5 has its own video tag to load videos so that you don't need a Flash plugin. And this is how it would look. You have a video src just like you would an image. This poster just is like the thumbnail you can think of, what image is displayed. The width and height. Preload just means load the video before as you load once with the page. Like don't wait to load it after the page is loaded. Controls gives the user controls. Auto plays it, I believe, or auto plays it. Actually, don't have my notes, but that's video. And this is another way to use video with multiple sources. It's really good to use multiple sources. If you rely on one source, there's going to be a lot of people who aren't going to be able to load that video. So you just use the source tag with the src attribute, and you have an MP4 at the beginning, and then you have a WebM. I know there's also .oog. I actually don't even know what that stands for, but I see it a lot. Those are the main three sources I see, and it'll just load the first one that the browser can load. And this doesn't require Flash, which is pretty nice, because it allows browsers to load them without any help. This is just the audio tag. It's not as widely talked about as the video tag, or people aren't nearly as excited about it, but it's there and has a similar syntax. Okay.
So there are some new input types as well that are pretty cool. We discussed that email, which kind of has a built-in validation to it. But if you want to type in like an input type date, you can kind of see what it looks like.
Yeah, the input type date, isn't it a pop-up automatically?
Yeah, it'll pop up a calendar and allow you to select a date.
You used to have to use a plugin to get that sort of effect, but you can just use input date.
And then slider allows you to select a range. And then there's the color type too. I forgot, I think it's type color, which will actually pop out a palette of colors.
Like a color wheel?
You select a color. Do you want to show? Are you guys familiar with all the new input types?
I doubt it. I'm really familiar with them. Yeah.
Color one returned when you select.
Probably a hex number. The way you do colors in CSS, there's like I think 90 or so, maybe less than that, of just string values. So red, blue. That you can do color, red, blue. Then there's hex numbers, which are 6 numbers or letters, A through F and 1 through 10. It can be any order, any of those, or 1 through 9. And those are hex numbers. And then there's another way. Then there's like an RGB value, which will give you the red, green, blue, which is like looks more like a function, but there's different ways. So it'll return, I assume, a hex value because that's preferred.
If you want to put it into the form and then submit it, you can take a look at the.
You want me to do that? Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna write up here. Let's see if there's. While I write that, let's see if there's anything else. Okay, you can talk about that while I write this.
So the password type, as we discussed earlier, obscures whatever you're typing in there with like those black dots. And then I'm not familiar with this, but I guess there's a new. Is that new that you can
required?
have that attribute right there called required?
I think so.
And give it value. Give it a value, and you can't submit the form without typing that in.
Yeah, I think it is. No. And also, this is what it looks like, this pop-up, which you usually have to use JavaScript to get. This is what the date input looks like. Search. This is what data list looks like. It's pretty cool. It's just a bar until you start typing, and then it has like a search. Okay. And this is everything that's pretty cool and new and more intense about HTML. It can do geolocation, drag and drop. It has a drag attribute and a drop. I think it's just drag attribute, and you can drop it. It can access local storage. It can have persistent storage. It can save much more. Although I'm not sure about the limit, but it's not infinite. But you can save more. But there's like 5 big ones. There are other things that HTML can do that are pretty powerful. Where you can build apps just with HTML and CSS and minimum JavaScript. But that is more or less, we're 6 minutes over when we said we were, which was already pretty long. Resources, we reference W3 Schools a lot. There's some tutorials on there. There's also Code Academy. I don't personally like Code Academy for HTML, but it's there. Code Academy for other languages I think is pretty good. Code.tutsplus.com, an amazing website with tutorials. We use them a lot here, just a reference when you need something done. Chances are someone's written a tutorial on it. This book, Design and Build Websites by John Duckett, is super pretty. Like it's really nice. It goes into HTML, CSS. You'll finish it like in 2 days max, and you'll walk away knowing everything you need to know. Text editor, we use Sublime Text, Chrome DevTools. This sort of mimics what our course structure was here, but if like you're thinking, hey, I want to be a programmer, what path do I follow? This is more or less what we've followed. Not exactly, but you start with HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Twitter Bootstrap's a framework. jQuery is a JavaScript framework that make it just grabbing elements so easy. Learn like command line interfaces, like navigating through your. If you have a Mac, it's called Terminal. Making directories. PHP is a backend language. MySQL is a database language. Laravel is a PHP framework, which uses a style of building applications called Model View Controller, which is really popular. You'll learn about that as you progress. And then Angular.js is a JavaScript framework, which we've been working on this week. And yeah. Okay. Anyways, I know we've kept you guys for too long, but I'm going to pass these out. And while I'm doing this, if you guys have any questions generally on the presentation that we can answer, you don't get one, Brian. You don't get one, Roger. Go ahead and ask them. Any confusion on what we've gone over?
So kind of a random question. So I've been learning Selenium to try to automate my browsers. And I use Firebug to kind of locate the element, do that whole thing, and oftentimes it doesn't work. It doesn't like the ID that I chose, or for whatever reason, and I use the XPath. But I have no idea what the XPath actually is, or.
Not that familiar with that either.
Okay.
It's a script.
So it's in Firebug. I just say basically return XPath. I'm not sure if that is something that.
Yeah, I assume it's the file path of some sort. What it exactly is, I am not sure. I couldn't tell you. But
I figured I'd ask, but yeah, I have no idea.
You can use the XPath. It basically you can use it to traverse your HTML document.
So if the document changes, though, does the XPath change? Like
Yes.
if it's by location,
Yeah.
so it makes it kind of brittle, I guess. Or okay.
That's the problem with Selenium tests. It's very brittle.
So, and I've worked on a project before where I used Selenium with jQuery.
Right.
So I could select things and locate things really easily.
Okay.
And that made all our Selenium test cases.
Yeah, I'm trying to move to use the WebDriver in Java.
Yeah, we use the Chromium WebDriver as well, and with Selenium, with jQuery to automate a lot of our stuff. Okay. So. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I keep using the XPath and I have no idea what it's like, it worked for me at least a couple times.
And in the Chrome Web Tools, by the way, if you find something you want to get the XPath of, you can just right click, get the XPath.
Okay.
And it'll just paste you the entire XPath and go from there.
Are there any other questions on HTML, CSS, programming in general?
Well, I would like to add a suggestion maybe. One of the programs I work with when I write HTML is called Brackets, which allows a live previewing in Chrome. So any changes you make are dynamically changed in Chrome whenever you have it open.
Well, it's Adobe's, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, they just released it in version 1.0. It's been in beta-ish for a while, but yeah, Adobe just released its version 1.0.
So it renders it live while you're typing in the...
Yeah. But it only works with Chrome, so you still have Chrome installed. You can't really use the live preview, but yeah, you can change it and dynamically update it in Chrome when you have the option turned on.
Is it Brackets.io or is it?
Yeah, Brackets.io. Yeah, it's a very useful program, and I can't live without it, basically.
Cool.
Also, in terms of just moving forward with it, as you guys try to learn more to become programmers, there are a lot of books that are like open source free books that are meant to be free on the internet. So think before buying an expensive book, because there's a lot of good resources out there. Just do some Googling. As you start the code, you'll be on Stack Overflow a lot. But yeah.
There are ones that aren't meant to be free either.
Information wants to be free. Are there any other questions?
How long have you guys been studying web development, web design now?
This is week 10. No, this is week 9.
Week 8.
Okay.
So
Zero index.
So in 8 weeks, you learned everything. Like, how versed were you before you actually came to Coder Vox?
I'd never written. I'd studied before actually getting here. I'd done Code Academy, like the Ruby path, but I never done like web development. So yeah, I think by in the week one we could write. I could probably show you the portfolios I had. I don't know if you guys saw 3 portfolios, but the first one was pretty brutal. I'm kind of embarrassed though. But like that third one, I built week 3 with that responsive design.
The bootstrap?
Yeah, the bootstrap. And since when we've gone into like databases and back-end stuff, like running like, and you learn a lot of just like little things that you would have never thought, not even related to the program, like running a server locally on your computer or redirecting like URLs to like your local IP so you can use it forever wherever you want to go. Just a lot of cool things like that. But yeah, not a lot of basically no programming experience.
I've dabbled around in HTML and CSS before, but I really haven't had any experience programming before this. And I have to say, like from the time that I started to the time that where I am right now, I've like jumped exponentially.
Yeah,
I used to like go on Craigslist and like look at web development jobs, and I'd be like, I would have no idea like what they were talking about. For me, it was just like a blur of like, you know, acronyms and stuff. But now like I go on there and I'm like, even if I don't really know what it is, I can look it up real quick and understand, you know, exactly where it's coming from and how it fits into the whole context of the development process. So.
I'd like to add one more thing. Kind of add into this as a computer science major. The first language is always the hardest to learn. And once you learn one language, the others just come. It took me a couple of months to learn my first language, but after that, it went down from a couple of months to a couple of weeks, then to a few days whenever I pick up a new language. So take that as you will.
You got a job yet?
Not yet.
You started doing interviews?
No, I've done freelance work on the
My
internet.
Coder Vox, you can bring it up to the next level, bro.
We're actually in the process of focusing specifically on the curriculum now toward weeks 9 through 12. That's when we actually focus on the interview and placement portions. So we want our students to be expert level, junior developers at this stage. So that's why we don't worry until placement and interviews get to the
We also have like an ending project, like 3. We have a break and like we do like a project that we build, and then we have like a
reverse
showing,
science fair.
Yeah, where we display what we built. That's the accumulation of everything we've learned. But, yeah.
Is this the first class at Coder Vox?
Well, it's not the first class overall. We did have part-time classes before, but this will be our first full-time boot camp. So.
I've been on Indeed looking at jobs, particularly in Java. And when I say Java, I'm also referring to the framework, the Spring, and all the Grails of mainly Spring, Hibernate, and all these things. There's a big presence there for those technologies. I'm noticing. The smattering of jQuery tossed in and a few other things that, you know, it's just front-end issues that you have to deal with. But then at the same time, I go, I'll check AngularJS, I'll check Laravel, I'll check. Not that many jobs come up.
Yeah.
Java's still.
Pretty big.
And I'm not here selling Java. Pain in the ass. But yeah,
I think it's highly just related to Android, just because the growth potential with Android is like huge. I mean, iOS is.
But in addition to that, a lot of back-end code and middleware is written in Java at the enterprise level.
Yeah, I think
don't mean to bring all this stuff.
I think it's the second
We're
most.
talking the big shot business type stuff, you know, Oracle, that kind of stuff.
I think it's the second most used backend. Could be the third, but I'm not sure. It's big.
Yeah, Java's legacy, man. It's gonna be there forever. Like it's your microwave. It's.
Well, I want it to be there forever. I want my job to be there forever until I'm retired.
Java's going to be around as long as Android's going to continue using it. So
I think even Roger recommended like after this, the next thing we should learn is Java after we get out.
And one of the reasons we focus on PHP here is because like the demand for PHP is very high. It's the most popular backend language out there right now. And like WordPress is written in PHP, and I think is Drupal. No,
yes.
But yeah, that's why we focus on PHP, and it's pretty powerful and easy to pick up. That's why it sometimes gets a bad rep because like beginners like take it and just hack away at it with not caring what their code looks like. And,
Says the beginner. That's awesome.
And I'm the senior developer's worst nightmare. Like I will hack away with it.
Yeah, PHP can be a nightmare if, like he was saying, the beginner just throw whatever in there. If it works, it works. You don't really care about cleanliness of code, and they just start to become a nightmare when putting people down the road. So yeah, if you do write a lot of PHP, watch out. So.
That was a general sentiment. I went to a
Thanks for coming.
Python meeting. They were talking about exactly that.
So you mentioned, so the J2EE market is really big right now, but that's for the back-end stuff. But if you go ahead and look for it, if you want a front-end job, you'll see EXT.js, you'll see jQuery, you'll see Angular. And even at our work, where we're a Java shop, 100% J2EE Java shop, we have front-end that we have Angular, we have jQuery, we don't have jQuery, we have EXT and Angular. So
I want to get your business card.
So,
I want to learn everything.
So even though there's a lot of Java jobs out there, if you specifically look for front-end jobs, you'll find, these Angulars, all that stuff. So it depends on what you want to look for. Because there's plenty of those front-end jobs out there.
Yeah, another thing, like some of those like technologies too, like they're not like you're talking about like PHP developer, you can get a job as a PHP developer, like that's it. Like but like, you look at like Angular person, that might be like part of a list of other things so there's like some stuff like I see jobs we just want a PHP developer and like you don't need to know JavaScript, that's all I want. So as far as like all the languages, it's probably hard to even like which ones are standalone, they can hold their own. Java is probably one of those, but Java is so encompassed with so many other things. It's like
that's what I'm noticing.
Yeah.
What do